Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Hey Arnold, the movie from 2002. Hey Arnold, the movie is kind of in a weird place in the Hey Arnold kind of history because as much as it is, the sole theatrical film of the Hey Arnold franchise, it doesn't seem to be the most discussed, and it seems like when they're talking about the show, they kind of seems to be left out. I had a hard time even Googling it. If you go Hey Arnold movie, it just goes Hey Arnold Jungle movie, sort of ignores this. Interesting. You really need to put the in there. And I think a lot of that is the production history in which this was never supposed to be the theatrical film. This was supposed to be a TV movie and sort of towards the end of the run of the TV show, which would make sense since there's certain big things that happen in this which wouldn't work unless it was at the end of the show. That doesn't make it bad necessarily. It was kind of more of a bad choice on Nickelodeon's part, which this was supposed to be called Arnold Saves the Neighborhood and be like a TV movie event thing, and then Arnold the Jungle movie was supposed to be the theatrical film. But it seemed like since Arnold Saves the Neighborhood was farther along in development, they chose to go with this one. And it sort of goes in line with various other 90s TV shows where a movie that was not meant to go to theaters is then put into theaters because the suits feel like, oh, well, it'll be fine, no one will really notice, much like Batman Mask of the Phantasm and even Doug's first movie, which people often compare Hey Arnold to for some reason. In some ways that works for Hey Arnold because it was always kind of a more modest show. As this movie started, I was a little worried. I was like, oh crap, is it gonna have like a crazy shot of the neighborhood where the camera's panning all over the place because suddenly they have a lot more money? And no, it doesn't do that, which is actually really good. It would kind of ruin the appeal of Hey Arnold if they did something like that. I think the Jungle movie would probably be a better compromise because it's like you can go into the question of the lore about his parents and see this much more cinematic kind of world and still bring the characters into it, and you don't have to ruin the already established world by forcing it to be more cinematic, shot differently than we ordinarily expect it to. Hey Arnold, the movie, doesn't do that, which is one of the smarter things it does. It does kind of have the whole idea of like stopping this major thing that's going to destroy the whole world and be this kind of like world-ending event type of thing. They still seemingly are able to do it in a very Hey Arnold way and mainly be more about the characters of the show who you care about. That makes this movie probably a little more enjoyable than you remembered it as. This guy Sheck, the CEO of Future Tech Industries, or FTI, has decided to announce plans that he's going to redevelop the area wherever the hell Arnold lives in that city and make it into a big shopping mall that'll be 6 blocks, and he thinks that he can get everyone to sell all their property and give it to him so he can make this shopping mall. Through this and through kind of various intimidations and so forth, he kind of gets them to sell. I also don't get, like, if he has all this money to take over this area, if you're gonna sell your property, I assume he's gonna pay pretty well. I mean, they don't really get into that. They just go, oh, I'm gonna have to sell, but they're gonna give you money. Maybe the property has gone up. Maybe if you, haggle a little bit, it would work out for you. I'm just saying that's an avenue the Hey Arnold movie doesn't go into, which I think would be interesting. What if someone's like, actually, me selling my place works out for me. I always wanted to relocate to Florida. Thank you, Sheck and Future Tech Industries. I mean, gentrification and building more shopping malls is something I'm against, but I also would like to retire, and this actually helped me do those things. But again, Hey Arnold, the movie, doesn't get into that, which I think is a little short-sighted to not think of the financial future of the parents and the adults and the property owners that exist within the show, but they just left that out. But anyway, Arnold and Gerald and the whole gang decide that they're going to try to fight this guy from taking over all of the land somehow. It looks like they're all going to have to leave, but then, see, there's no way you could have done it without selling to different people. It's just legally, that's a huge plot hole with this movie, but I'll let it go. So, but then Arnold finds out there's a document that shows that all of the land would be a historic landmark, which would also make all of their property invalid. See, this is just, there are so many holes in the Hey Arnold movie. I mean, this is like a property dispute and the use of property dispute nightmare in terms of like, okay, so he has to get this historical document that shows that the area is a national landmark and they can't build this thing on it and destroy all these things, but I'm pretty sure all those townhouses weren't there when the history stuff happened, so maybe it would have been a double nightmare where the place where he lives becomes like a Williamsburg, Virginia type of thing. They should have really thought this out. out. I should have been in a story meeting or something. So he finds out there's this document about the tomato incident, and that if he finds it, he can stop them from building this big mall that Future Tech Industries is going to do. And Helga's father is very much for it because he's going to make Bob's Beeper Emporium, and a really big one, despite the fact in 2002 he really should have just been rebranding as Bob's cell phone store or something, but whatever. It was in the beginning of the show, let's just keep it going. So Arnold, Gerald, and Helga have to try to stop this guy Sheck from taking over their town and destroying the neighborhood that they grew up in. One thing I think that really works about Hey Arnold the movie is it understands that what you love about this show is the characters. You love, seeing Arnold's grandparents and all the quirky kind of people who live in the neighborhood. It gives almost everyone a showcase, but at the same time, it has way too much of that. It knows it has to give you little beats with almost everyone because it is Hey Arnold the movie. They don't want to leave anybody out, although I didn't see Stoop Kid anywhere, so I guess they left some people out, but I would have liked to have seen Stoop Kid. But I think you would have defended his Stoop. Maybe he was in the background and I missed it. I like how it definitely likes to live in that world and doesn't break from it, particularly the opening, which was just a bunch of title cards or something, feeling very much like a TV movie, even worked for the kind of Hey Arnold world and the modesty that kind of works within the show. The kind of the urban living modesty that went throughout Hey Arnold, I think, was something that I really enjoyed about it. It wasn't really a major movie, and it didn't do really very well at all. It came out right before 4th of July weekend, which they seemingly like to do to movies, like animated movies. Didn't Powerpuff Girls come out right before a 4th of July weekend? And I believe South Park did, and Hey Arnold, and I think the only one that did well was South Park. This movie wasn't that expensive, actually, but because it didn't do well, the Hey Arnold the Jungle movie was canceled. I know people say there's a variety of different reasons, but it's pretty much Craig Bartlett maintains that it was no, the movie didn't do well, so we didn't get to do another one. It kind of got bulldozed over, and I think it would have done a lot better if it was kind of the big release of that weekend rather than, option number 4. It even opened against Mr. Deeds, the Adam Sandler movie, but it also opened after the second week of Lilo and Stitch, which beat it. This film opened in 6th place underneath even Scooby-Doo and Lilo and Stitch. So not only did it come out right before 4th of July, it also came out against 2 pretty big family films, which both did very well. So it was a good time for family films, just not a good time for the Hey Arnold movie. I understand why some people don't love this movie, but I had fun with it. It wasn't amazing or anything. It felt like maybe a lesser episode of the show for the most part. Certainly what it does with Arnold and Helga, I thought was particularly something that moment felt very genuine. It felt like the moment we had all been waiting for if you watch the show, and it really played in that way and played beautifully in that way, actually. And most of the stuff they were doing in it, I thought, in terms of using the old characters, played as genuinely as Hey Arnold almost always plays. It's almost a very genuine kind of humble show, and it worked within that. The bigger characters, which were obviously added for the movie, from Christopher Lloyd's character of The Undertaker, which that was probably, of all the celebrity guest star people, I liked the most. Jennifer Jason Leigh's part felt a little weird, why do we have a spy in the middle of this thing? That just felt odd. Let's just throw in this female spy who has a spy network or something. Was that in there before or something, and I forget it or didn't see it? I don't know. And then Paul Sorvino, who I seem to be seeing a lot of movies with recently where he's sort of miscast as the guy who runs all this stuff. Paul Sorvino doesn't have the most uniquely sounding voice. A lot of what works about him as an actor is his presence, and I probably talked before about how voice acting and live action acting, or however you want to call it, is different because there's a physicality to it. You're acting with not just your voice, and some people have very expressive voices and some people don't, and that doesn't work for them. And I wonder why have him as the villain? I don't need famous people in the movies, but it's Paul Sorvino was your big villain. I mean, it's I like Paul Sorvino, but it's Hey Arnold the movie isn't something that will really honestly make a big impression or stay with you. And even the Helga kind of revelation could have maybe worked in the Jungle movie, although I heard an interview with Craig Bartlett where he talks about in the Jungle movie it's for Arnold to show his feelings back to Helga, so this would have played into one another. Had this been a TV movie, it would have worked continuity wise. This movie kind of screams of sort of irrelevancy. It's kind of and if you know comic books where you have a big annual story that you notice has nothing to do with the continuity of the regular issues and doesn't seem to matter very much to them, this kind of feels that way. It's there's all this stuff in it, but because you don't have that other piece, I don't think this really connected with an audience as much. There's certain good episodes of Hey Arnold, like the Stoop Kid, like the Thanksgiving episode, like countless others that I constantly think about about the things that happen in them and the emotions they tackle in those, much like classic Peanuts strips, which was a big influence on Arnold, and just that kind of melancholy of childhood. And this didn't really get into that, you know. It's interesting that doing kind of like a modest kind of cartoon and giving it a movie doesn't necessarily work all the time. You know, the only successful one I can really think of is the actual Peanuts movie from a couple years ago. And Hey Arnold, the movie, I think kind of gets so into this big plot of destroying the neighborhood that it just kind of falls into the thing like, hey, we're doing a movie. And had this been a TV movie, it wouldn't have felt that way as much. I do think the Jungle movie kind of has a similar problem where you're not necessarily doing what Hey Arnold is known for and what Hey Arnold is best at. You're doing kind of the big cinematic thing that people expect you to do when you're going to a movie. The rare TV show that has the success and the money to do this big cinematic thing, and what are you going to do with it? I think it is kind of an interesting thing to put a show through. Recently I talked about both South Park and the DuckTales movies, and I think in DuckTales it works because DuckTales, you know, was already sort of like that, so it's just like a bigger adventure. It was fine, and South Park knew where to take the show within that. Hey Arnold, the movie, didn't, but because it was mainly trying to be a TV movie. So a lot of the criticism how it's not the greatest movie or not very cinematic or something like that is par for the course, because it sounds like they didn't really know what they were developing until late in the game, and it was the executive's fault. I think Nickelodeon probably should have let them, you know, out of respect, just certainly for the creators, make the Hey Arnold movie they wanted to. But if they made the Hey Arnold movie, the Jungle movie, and it came out in 2004, how many of you who are so nostalgic for it at this point would have actually been as into it when you were like a freshman in high school and stuff? And I know someone in the comments will be like, fuck you, Jim, I would have seen it. I'm sure you would have, but I think honestly it probably wouldn't have worked out. So it was kind of like a really bad development they put this movie in and so forth. Maybe it should have just worked out that the Jungle movie came out in 2002 and they hadn't rushed this out, but that's a whole other thing. It just feels kind of like a side story that doesn't really connect and capture what was so great about Hey Arnold and why we still talk about it and reference it. And I end up watching the Thanksgiving one once a year, and I end up watching a couple episodes on the Splat a couple times a year, and it brings back wonderful memories to me. Hey Arnold, the movie, doesn't really do that. It kind of just felt like, oh, okay, I saw that, that's neat. And now I can see the Jungle movie. It's kind of interesting how the fates of this and the Jungle movie, because this was supposed to be the TV movie and Jungle movie was supposed to be the theatrical film, and they kind of flipped. I think Hey Arnold, the movie, if you're a fan, I would say definitely see it, but if you're not, there's not really much there for you. It doesn't expand on the show. It isn't even a great example of the show. I would just say see the show. It's a fun little movie. It's not a horrible time. I think it does right by the characters, and it doesn't completely like ruin the show or anything, but it's not a great example of the show either. It does fall into the kind of like, let's do a bigger plot because we have a movie thing, regardless of what the original intent of this material was. I don't feel like it necessarily works as well as it could have, or it would if it was like a major plot that we had been building towards. This just felt like a weird side thing that like doesn't really work, and honestly doesn't really entirely make a lot of sense that something like this would even happen to a large 6-block radius of a major metropolitan city. It's like a fun little fine kids film that you take everyone to see and then you sort of forget about and never see again. It's the kind of film you see once and are modestly kind of fine with what it did. It doesn't offend you, but it doesn't create any sort of excitement and elation. And that's probably why it was honestly hard for me to find this anywhere but Amazon, because it just didn't feel like the passion for even people having it available was even really there. This doesn't feel like a total failure, and financially it wasn't as big of a failure as maybe it's led to believe, but with a poster that's kind of meh, and with a kind of an idea that I think is a little kind of standard for these kind of movies. It's too much of a save the clock tower, save the rec center, let's save 6 blocks of city streets, which seems a bit extreme version of that. I just never really felt it got beyond being the kind of basic kind of TV show turns into a movie kind of big sort of plot, but thankfully it has such a strong center with all of the characters. It slightly becomes more than that, but not more enough, which is probably why nobody really remembers much about Hey Arnold the movie. So if you've seen Hey Arnold the movie and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.